In Kenya, there are cars that are overlooked or they don't get the necessary attention they deserve. An example is this Suzuki S-Cross. Welcome back to 0 to 60 Motoring once again. My name is Bill Turi, and today I'm going to give you a review of this 2018 Suzuki S-Cross. If you are new around, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of our video reviews or car comparisons. If you want to purchase a car, we can source a clean car for you under our car scouting program. Reach us through the number below and we are going to scout a clean car for you. So when you look at this car, it doesn't have the traditional looks of an SUV, but this car comes with a decent ground clearance because you have 18 centimeters of ground clearance, and that tells you that you don't need aftermarket medium duty or heavy duty springs for this car to handle our roads. It doesn't have the traditional looks of an SUV, but you can tell that it's a little bit rugged. But basically at 2.3 million shillings, it can actually serve that purpose, because if you revise your budget a little bit to 2.6 million shillings, then you can purchase something that looks like a traditional crossover. That is the Suzuki S-Cross. So that's why this car exists. If you are having a tight budget, you get into an S-Cross. If budget allows, you get into the S-Cross, because these cars are actually built on the same platform. So when you look at the pricing of these S-Cross, which is 2.3 to 2.4 million shillings, other cars that you can purchase at that budget include the Peugeot 2008, you have a Mitsubishi RVR or a Mazda CX3. But if you revise your budget a little bit, maybe to 2.6 million shillings, you can also get into a Honda Vezel or the Suzuki S-Cross, which is based on this car, but it has those SUV or a crossover like looks, or something like the Subaru Impreza XV. So those are the cars that can serve as the alternatives to these Suzuki S-Cross. So when you look at that class, at 2.3 million shillings, the S-Cross is one of the most affordable cars you can purchase. And the clearest or the nearest rivals because of the pricing will be the 2008 and something like the CX3, because the Vezel and the likes of the XV, you have to fork out around 2.6 million shillings. So if you want a good trim, something like a GT7, or even for the RS version of the Vezel, you're going to fork out around 2.7 million shillings. When you look at the S-Cross, it is not the most beautiful car out there, but it comes off as a rugged, let me say, crossover-like car. Away from the ground clearance, you have a 17-inch rims which complement the ground clearance, of course, to give you something that can do slight off-roading. And when you are looking at this face, it is actually looking like an aggressive car. It may not be as appealing to the eye or as soft to the eye as something like a CX3, but this one is actually more rugged and, let me say, sharper. On the rear side, the S-Cross maintains a minimalist design. You have a SX4 S-Cross badge here, all grip badge here, of course, to tell you the drivetrain of this car, parking sensors, and these are finishes here which actually protect the car when maybe you are going off-road. These are hard plastics. They are very common with cars like the Outbacks or even the cross-country versions of the Volvo. So what powers are these 2018 S-Cross? Under the hood, you have a 1.4 liter direct injection turbo petrol. It is actually called a 1.4 booster jet engine, and if you want the exact code, it is actually called a K14C. It is the same engine you're going to find in cars like the Suzuki Swift Sport, which has been giving Marquex and Subaru guys a massive run for their money. That is on a lighter note because I also drive a Subaru. So in terms of the power numbers, you are looking at around 140 HP and 220 Newton meters of torque. So these are 1.4 liter turbo petrol here, makes more power than the other engine option that you can purchase with this S-Cross, which is a 1.6 liter naturally aspirated petrol engine. So the K14C engine is married to a 6-speed automatic transmission that sends power to all wheels of this car. That's why you have that all grip badge on the trunk of this vehicle, because power is sent to all the 4 wheels. So when you look at the powertrains of the Suzuki S-Cross, these are K14C is more mechanically complex compared to the 1600cc, that is the non-turbo variation. It is because this one uses a forced induction system in form of a turbo, but also the way fuel is injected in this car is different from how the 1.6 liter works, because in this car you have a direct injection engine, and in the other variation, the 1.6 liter uses a port injection system. That tells you that the other is a mechanically simpler, and the other variation can be forgiving a little bit, especially if you don't get it right with the fuel. So if you are purchasing this 1.4 liter turbo petrol, by the virtue that it's a direct injected, it means that you should be using clean fuel, or basically you should identify a gas station which has a good reputation when it comes to fuel, because direct injection engines may not be as forgiving as a port injected engines when it comes to fuel. So far, the 1.4 liter turbo petrol is a new engine, especially in these S-Cross and the likes of the Scudo. But based on my experience from the Suzuki Swift, which utilizes the same motor, it is a fairly reliable engine with just normal maintenance. Of course, if you want a simpler lifestyle, you can ignore this 1.4 liter turbo petrol and pick the 1.6 liter, but you are going to lose out on the performance element. So whichever way you go, whether you go for this K14C or the 1.6 liter, there are pros and cons of either motor. So this is an XUK car. So the speedometer is calibrated in miles per hour. You have a 0 to 140 miles per hour, but you can also read your speed in form of kilometers per hour, 0 to 220 kilometers per hour. There is a panoramic sunroof that makes the cabin lit and lively. You have leather seats, of which the front ones are actually heated. Other extra features in this car include an auto starter stop system, of course, to make sure that you are getting decent fuel numbers in traffic. You have a traction control, parking sensors, and a collision mitigation system. On this center console here, you have a traditional gear knob. The main problem of this straight traditional gear knob is that if you are not keen, you may put the car in manual mode, and you are going to realize that when you start driving. So when you are shifting the car from parking to drive, you have to be sure that you have left it in D and not in manual mode, because it's just a straight line. So on this center console here, you have this lock button here, and it acts like locking a differential, whereby it helps distribute or balance power between the front and the rear wheels, because this car is an all-wheel drive car. You have a snow mode here and a sports mode, of course, to help you when maybe you want to make an overtaking move, or when you want to drive in an enthusiastic manner. You can always flip the car into sports mode. Another feature I like about this car is that it comes with these heated side mirrors. Not many cars come with such a feature. In terms of accommodation, that is a space, I feel like the S-Cross is an accommodative car. The headroom is not that good, but the knee room is okay. But this amount of headroom is actually what many cars in this class are going to give you. And the sitting position is okay. The road visibility should be good from the driver's position. How about the second row seats? So this is a second row seat of this S-Cross. Of course, the knee room is a little bit tight and the headroom is not that massive, but still it can be forgiven, because many cars around that budget point actually may feel a little bit cramped. So in terms of accommodation, if you have a small family, I don't think you're going to have a problem with the Suzuki S-Cross. So this is the trunk space you have with this S-Cross, and I think it is actually generous. It is more generous than what rivals I will be giving. For instance, this car is more spacious than a Peugeot 2008 or even a CX3. And one thing I like about this S-Cross is that it is coming with a spare wheel, something that many cars these days don't come with. So when you are looking at the S-Cross, while it is a small car, it doesn't really disappoint in terms of accommodation, because it beats many cars in this segment in terms of the spacing element. So while it looks small, it is actually not that small when you compare to the rivals. So how does the Suzuki S-Cross drive? I like the road visibility from this seating position. These are S-Cross. There are no blind spots whatsoever. I have a very good view of the road ahead. The steering wheel, of course, feels light, but I don't have a problem with that. The transmission is doing a very good job, and it is always at the right gear at the right time. Now, it is not agile to drive, maybe compared to something like the Suzuki Swift Sport, but I don't have a problem whatsoever regarding how this car handles. It's a small car, and placing it within the lane is a very easy thing to do. Being an XUK car, the turn signals or the indicators are on the wrong side, because you are having them on this left side here, and on the right side you have this wiper, and of course your wiper. So it may come out a little bit confusing at first, but once you get used to it, there is no problem whatsoever. So when I'm looking at the acceleration of this car, while it is a 1.4 liter petrol engine, I feel like it's more responsive than even a majority of 2 liter petrol engines out there. For instance, I find that this car more responsive than the FB20 in the Subaru XV GT7, but I think it's because it packs more torque than that FB20, though the Impreza XV has I think 10 horsepower extra. So I think the element of being turbocharged actually makes this car to feel a little bit responsive when it comes to driving dynamics. So the 1.4 liter turbo petrol has a decent power for day-to-day driving. I'll say that it has a usable power on a day-to-day basis. This car is not as fast as the Suzuki Swift Sport, but you can tell this one is bulkier in terms of the aerodynamics, and it's even bigger in size. So technically, it's not going to be as fast as the Suzuki Swift, because that car weighs less than 1 ton, and this one is at around 1.3 something tons. So the element of a power to weight ratio also takes a toll on this car. So you may be wanting a comparison of this 1.4 liter turbo petrol and the 1.6 liter in terms of a power delivery and drivability. I've driven the SX4 with the 1.6 liter NA petrol, and even I've driven that a car with that engine, that is the Suzuki S-Cross. We have a short review that is on our YouTube channel. You can actually check it out. When I'm comparing the power delivery of this 1.4 K14C turbo petrol engine versus the 1.6 liter naturally aspirated version, I feel like this one is actually a more responsive and a livelier setup, if I can use that term, because while this one packs more power, the advantage is that because this is a turbocharged car, that power is actually available from low numbers or low RPMs. So you really don't need to stress this car to give you that power like you could do in the 1.6 liter naturally aspirated petrol variation. So in terms of drivability, if I'm comparing this 1.4 liter turbo petrol and the 1.6 liter NA variation, I feel like this is the version to have if you want something that can actually tick your box regarding driving dynamics. It feels livelier. In the 1.6 liter NA variation, even if you flip the car into sports mode, the response doesn't really become that good. The car only becomes a little bit louder. So in terms of drivability, the 1.4 liter beats the 1.6 liter pants down, but of course that one is expected even when you are looking at the power numbers. So this car sits at speeds with ease, because I'm now at these 60 miles per hour. That should be around 98. Let me cross the 100 kilometers mark. That is 62 miles per hour. That should be 100 kilometers per hour. So this car sits at those speeds without any problem. because of that torque, and the fact that it's available from low numbers actually makes it a good car to drive on a daily basis. Of course, I like how the 6-speed automatic transmission shifts gears. It is always at the right gear at the right time. That is the best way to put it actually. Of course, being a turbocharged, that doesn't mean that it is a car that I should be taking to the track somewhere, maybe like a Masinga TT or to do drag racing. It is basically a small car that actually has been turbocharged to give you a little bit of power for that day-to-day driving. Basically, it's a car that has been made to be more responsive than the 1.6 liter variation, and it is a trend nowadays with most manufacturers. They downsize engines and then they turbocharge them, of course, to improve on fuel consumption. That is why even the clearest or the nearest rival to this car, that is the Peugeot 2008, has a 1.2 liter turbo petrol engine. It is not because of performance, but rather to also improve on fuel consumption without necessarily compromising on how the car will be responding. So while it's a turbo engine, it is not meant for the track. It is just to compensate for that a little bit of a displacement loss. How does the fuel consumption of this S-Cross look like? Under normal driving conditions, this car should be averaging like 15 kilometers per liter. That is on the highway. But then when you spend a lot of time in traffic, the fuel numbers can actually drop to something like 13.5 kilometers per liter. So it tells you, if you take this car on a highway or on a long trip, it is actually going to give you those impressive fuel numbers. And the reason is simple, because this car has some decent torque from low RPMs, and you really don't need to keep on pinning it hard. Then that is the reason why you are getting impressive fuel figures from this S-Cross 1.4 liter turbo petrol. Remember that 15 kilometers per liter, you are achieving it when you drive the car under the normal mode and you are not engaging a sports mode. Because when you engage a sports mode, what normally happens is that the car holds to high RPMs and holds to gears longer, of course, in anticipation to give you that overtaking move. And that actually now takes a toll on fuel consumption. So for you to get that 15 kilometers per liter, you have to be a gentle driver, or let me just say, you have to drive normally. If you drive abnormally, you're going to see numbers around 13 kilometers per liter. So what problems are you going to face if you purchase the S-Cross? If a boda guy runs into your lights in traffic, or you get involved in a slight accident, you may have a problems sourcing body parts for this car, because it's not a common car, and spare part dealers are not stocking parts of this car. Because if you are in business, you can't be stocking parts of a car that is not popular, because that will be bad business. So for body parts, it's going to take you long sourcing them, or in some cases you may have to ship them. But that is the price you pay if maybe you want to stand out of the crowd, or if you want something unique. Other than the body parts, this car shares a lot of its mechanical underpinnings with the Suzuki S-Cross and sometimes with the Suzuki Swift Sport. So you're not going to have a problem, especially getting mechanical parts or sourcing mechanical parts. But for body parts, you may spend a little bit longer getting them. So is the S-Cross a sensible purchase? We've scouted many Peugeot 2008 and Mazda CX3 units, and before you settle for the 2008 or the CX3, I'll advise that you take a look at the S-Cross, because it brings a couple of things to the table. By being accommodative, it can do slight off-roading, and most importantly, it is actually sensibly priced. So it is a car you can consider if you have a small family, if you want something a little bit rugged that can do slight off-roading, and something that actually stands out of the crowd. I think that a shorter review is going to give you a little bit of insights regarding the S-Cross. If you have a question regarding this car, because this short review cannot cover everything, you can always get in touch with us. If you also want information considering the rivals of this car, that is the Peugeot 2008, we have the CX3, we have the RVR, Impreza XV, GT7. You can always get in touch with us regarding a car consultancy. Alright guys, I think that is enough for today. I'll see you on the next one on a 0 to 60 motoring.